Charles Edward Guske about his early memories, that this information perhaps someday will be useful to his great-great-great-great-grandchildren. Go ahead.
Thanks, Kent. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, Cook County, in April the 8th, 1919. My parents, father was Henry A. Guske from Fort Huron, Michigan. My mother was Rose Emma Freemuth from Ottoville, Ohio. My father and mother met while working together at the interurban streetcar lines in Flint, in the office on South Saginaw Street. They both worked in the office as clerks, and they met there, and that's where my father courted and eventually married my mother. Shortly after they married, my father took a job with the Grand Trunk Railway, which was a railroad that ran from Chicago to Fort Huron, which was a division of the Canadian National Railway.
When was the date they got married?
You'd have to look that up in the date my mother and father were married. You'd have to look up in that genealogy book. I just don't remember. Anyway, we were living. My folks were living in Chicago. They had an apartment in the largest apartment building in the country at that time. It has since been destroyed, but we didn't stay in Chicago long. If you'll recall, 1919 was the year that John Dillinger was real strong, killing people and all, and I think that had a lot to do with getting them back out of that big city life. Anyway, the railroad transferred my father back to Flint, where he worked for a few years, during which time my sister Marie was born, and she has the distinction of being the first baby born in the woman's hospital in Flint. Her picture hung on a plaque, or they had a plaque in the hall of that hospital for many, many years. After a few years in Flint, the railroad transferred my father back to his hometown, which was Fort Huron, Michigan. And while they lived there, my brother John was born. I don't know exactly where, but shortly then again, he got a territory. My father got a territory of his own with the railroad. He was responsible for all the rolling stock between Belsey, Michigan, and Capac, Michigan, which was 50 or 60 miles long. Let's see, I better tell you first that Kenny was born there after we lived there 4 or 5 years. Kenny was born, that's our youngest brother. Another exciting thing that happened that I can remember, this was one of my earliest recollections. We had an old, I think it was a Chevrolet, I don't know what year. We were going along a country road, and Mother was sitting in the front with my dad was driving, and I was sitting behind my mother. And we come up over a hill, and there was a horse straddled the road. Well, Dad blew the horn, and the horse started walking across the road. And so my dad turned naturally to the left to go around the back of the horse. Well, the horse stopped, and everything that was anticipated didn't happen, and we hit the horse in the flank, spun him around, and the horse's head came in and landed on my mother's lap. Scared her half to death. It didn't cut the head off, but the horse just swung around and the head came through the window. And I can remember that from way back. I don't know, I couldn't have been over 3 or 4 years old, I don't believe, at the time. But the horse got up and ran off. The car was caved in, it broke the radiator and a whole bunch of other things, and the farmer was liable because he didn't keep his horse pinned up. Come to find out, the horse was blind and didn't really know where he was to begin with. But the farmer paid and everything came all right. Nobody got hurt. While living in Lapeer, we had quite a few unfortunate things to happen. Every house we lived in Lapeer, and we lived in, I think, let's see, the one out in the country, one in town, and the farmhouse. Every one of them we had a fire. The one in town, well, 2 of them in town that we lived in, really. My dad built a fire in the laundry stove and ran off to work, and the first thing you know, just before he left, he happened to look back and he saw the smoke and flame coming out of the basement. He'd built a fire in the laundry stove and it had overdone it, and the flame was shooting out of the tops and all over. And the neighbors saw it, and they come running over and they grabbed the stove, I remember, and ran up the stairs, threw it out. That didn't burn, just smoked up stuff. Another house we lived in, we went to visit our grandparents in Fort Yorn. This was a few years later. Let's see, I think Kenny was born then already, and they locked up the house and took off on a Sunday morning to go over to Fort Yorn, which was a common thing. We did it a lot, to go over and visit my dad's folks. And when we came back that night, our living room chair was sitting out on the front porch. And they wanted to know, did I leave that there? And they said, no, I could hear them, I remember hearing them talking about it. And they pulled in, went in, and the whole basement had burned out. The neighbor had seen the fire in the basement, and they called the fire department in time, but it burned the whole basement up. Smoked the house too. But the most disastrous thing was, I'll tell you a little later. First I'll lay the background. They bought a farm on the edge of town. It was about 17 acres, and this was just about the time of the Depression, when no one had jobs. Everything was pretty tight, but we did fairly well because we had everything on that little farm that you needed to have. We had hams, we had pigs we slaughtered, we had chickens, and we had eggs, bees. We had bees for honey. We had all kinds of berry bushes. We had all kinds of fruit trees, cherries, berries, and we grew our own vegetables, potatoes, and so on. So we really didn't need the store. We even made our own butter. We had our own cream, and a whipping cream, and it was just, we just never realized that there was a depression as far as food went. But the Depression hit home hardest, in my memory, because I used to go to school with shoes that had holes in the bottom. I'd put cardboard in the soles so that I'd have a sole in my shoe. That was common. Or you'd go down to the dime store, and for a dime, if you had a dime, you could buy a rubber piece of composition that you could glue on and cover up that hole. But more often than not, we put cardboard in our shoes so we'd cover up the holes. Well, we moved to this place on the farm, and no electricity, no running water. We had no running water for years. And we had to have a barn for the cow. They had an old lean-to shed, and my dad decided to build this nice barn. He could store the hay above. And so we commenced construction on this barn. Just about had it finished. Christmas time came, and our home was a big old farmhouse that my dad and I had wired, put electricity in. Had a floor furnace. The furnace was down in the basement, and you had this big register where all your heat came up through this one register. And we'd leave for the weekend. This happened to be Christmas weekend. We had about 3 or 4 days. It was in the middle of the winter, and the winters in Michigan are pretty cold. So he used to bank the fire, and he would come back in 1 or 2 days, whenever we'd be gone, and check it and shake it down and rebank it, put more coal on it. It was a coal-fired furnace. So he came home the day after Christmas from his folks, and we stayed there at Grandma's. And that next morning, they called my dad and said that the house had burned down. We lost everything. We had no clothes except what we had taken over for a 1-night stay at Grandma's, or 2 nights. We lost all our Christmas presents. My sister had a especially great big doll that she'd wanted, and it was as big as she was. And I remember just before we went to Grandma's, she wanted to take it, and they said no, there wouldn't be room in the car. But I never forgot that. She lost that. We lost everything we had. So here we are without a home. We temporarily went into an apartment downtown, and my dad quick finished up that barn. Remember I told you we were starting? And it wasn't quite complete, but it wasn't far from completion. Put in a partition, put in a sink, we had running water by this time, and we moved into that barn. Upstairs we had just a hay loft, and us kids all slept up there. Plenty of room, no hay in it or anything yet. They hadn't used it. And they converted the downstairs. It was kind of a drive-in garage barn combination, and we actually moved and lived in that until we could rebuild the house. We moved into that garage barn home, and my youngest brother got pneumonia and darn near died. I never forget that. That was some scary times too. This worked out all right until we could, like I say, we could get our home built. We rebuilt on the same place. Unbeknownst to me at the time, the man who delivered the lumber from Belsey Lumber Company turned out in later life to be my brother-in-law. He married a sister, and married the other sister of a Burgess family in Flemingville. A little later, more on that. So we built the house and continued to live there until I left home, and in fact until all the children were out of school. My mother died in 1937, just before I graduated from high school, from complications. She had a blood clot development, went to her heart after an operation.
This was in Fort Huron? Was that in Fort Huron?
This is all in Lapeer.
No, I mean, where was the hospital?
Oh, we didn't have a hospital.
They had a home.
Lapeer had a big old house run by 2 sisters that were nurses. There was no hospital. It was just a big home, and they converted the rooms to operating room and so on. There wasn't wasn't such a thing as a hospital in those days.
What was she operating on for?
It was some female organs that weren't operating correctly. And in those days there was no sulfa, no anything like that to hold down or any blood clot dissolvents or anything else. So,
Okay, and
so we lost her.
what are some of the your earliest relatives that you can remember? Tell us about like Grandpa Guske. What was his name? And how many brothers
my
and sisters
dad.
did Henry have?
Oh my gosh, I don't remember the exact number. My father's family, it was a large family. His father came from Germany to Canada and brought his small family with him. He had a boy and a girl, and they came to Canada, and then migrated to Port Huron, where there were some other relatives, not Guskes, but there were other Germans there. But before he got here with his wife and 2 children, his wife died on the way or just after they got here, and he and me remarried. They had, I think it was 13 children. I'm not positive about that. It's in the book that was taken up, brought up to date by the relatives. They all lived around Port Huron, and my grandpa worked at the railroad too. He used to build the boxcar doors. I remember that. I used to go and visit my grandmother, and she used to make homemade root beer. It's just like you'd make beer. In fact, Grandpa had a still in the basement, and she had a still for root beer. We, as children, would go down there, and she'd get us a good slug of the root beer, and it was very good. Never forgot that. My mother's parents lived in Ottoville, Ohio. He was a farmer, and he had a great big family too. I think they had 11 children. He retired from the farm and let his oldest son, run it. And he moved into the city, and he kept a cow there. We used to go there and visit too. I'd visit there a lot during the summers when I grew up. I can remember that. I'd be put on a train, and somebody would meet me, and that's how I'd get around. I started traveling when I was very young on the trains all over the country. In fact, when I was 14, I took my brother John and I got on the train in Lapeer. My mother packed a shoebox full of fried chicken. This was in 1933. Put us on the train in Lapeer, and it was an overnight trip to Chicago for he and I. So we slept in the seats, got up when the train got in Chicago, and you could walk over to the World's Fair was on at that time. And we'd go over, John and I would go over then to the fair, and you could get in for 50 cents, I think it was, for kids. And we'd spend the weekend at the fair and then take the train. I knew which train to take back, and we'd arrive back home Monday morning in time to go to school.
Where'd you sleep?
What?
You said you spent the weekend there. Where did you sleep?
Well,
In Chicago.
we'd sleep on the way there. We'd be there all day, and then we'd sleep that night on the train and get back. See?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, which
We
one?
never stayed there because I never spent over $2 the whole weekend because we carried our box lunch.
Because your dad worked for the railroad, it was the train trip.
Oh
free?
yeah, we rode the train for free.
Now,
We made trips all over. I used to go to Wisconsin to visit my aunts and uncles. I'd go to Toledo. In fact, when I graduated, my dad fixed me up with a ticket, and I took my brother again, John, and we took a train, made all the connections going through Chicago out to California. The Golden Gate Bridge opened in, I think it was April of 1937, yeah. And John and I walked across it just a couple months later, just to say we'd seen it. It was a beautiful bridge, some wonders of the world. So we saw that. We mostly were riding trains. We slept on the train, and we went along the coast of California, back to the middle part of the country. Never stopped any particular place. But there was one interesting thing happened. When we got on the train, we got going, and about past St. Louis, I got a toothache. And during those years, the railroads had a hostess right on the train, a woman that was probably a nurse's aide or something like that. And she did what she could. She packed it, and it was just didn't get any better, and it started swelling. So we got into Denver, and the train crew had made arrangements for a dentist to meet me at the train. He looked at it there and he said, "No, come on, I'll take it to the office." His office was just a little ways away, and I remember he had this little old Ford Model T or whatever it was. And we went to his office, and he quick pulled it and gave me a towel to catch the blood and rushed me back to the train, and they were holding that train until I got back. And it was a big long train. It must have had 20 or 21 cars. And they held that train until they brought me back, and then they took off. The minute I hit the step of the car, why, he hollered all aboard, and I thought that was pretty nice of him to go to all that trouble. But in those days, see, a lot more of their customers, even though I was a free rider, riding on a pass, what they used to call a pass. That was something I never forgot about that trip. We had a good big trip.
What about all these 13 children? Which of the relatives do you remember, besides Aunt Irene and Uncle Al?
Oh, I remember all the relatives, because I was one of the first. Well, I was the first of the family to be born. The mother and dad, and the relatives used to come home a lot. Well, I can remember all of them. We used to have reunions all the time there in Port Huron. We'd go for Easter down to Toledo or down to Ottoville. Then all the mother's sisters and brothers would be there. So we kept in close touch with all of them, and all the cousins. Were many cousins.
Do you remember when your grandpa Guske died?
Oh, not the exact day. I just know we went to the funeral one day. No, I don't. He was old. They just passed on. Same with grandmas.
Both in Port Huron.
Both in Port Huron.
Both buried in Port Huron.
Pardon?
They're buried in Port Huron.
Oh yeah, I'm buried in Port Huron. And Uncle and the Grandma and Grandpa Fremont, of course, are buried in Ottoville. My mother's side, one of her sisters became a nun. She didn't live long though in the convent, because she developed a cold or something in influenza that killed her. Mother also had a brother that became a priest, Uncle Willie, who I used to go fishing many a day with him, and got to know that side of the family real well. because we were in close touch. He died not, oh God, it's only been a couple of years now, but he taught in the Catholic schools, was a principal or something for many years, and had his own parish there in Toledo, where Anelma lives. Now, after I played football, was in the school plays. I was in the track team. Never played baseball, because I had a lot of chores to do, and I was lucky I could get to play football, considering the time it took to practice. After I graduated in 1937, in June, I got a job at Pontiac, Michigan, at the automotive company, Pontiac Motor Company. They made automotive cars. I worked the night shift for a while, midnight shift, which was very hard for me to keep awake. I transferred around and eventually wound up as a electrician's helper on the maintenance crew. Then I worked there. I was working there, in fact, when the World War II, when Pearl Harbor was bombed in 1941, and they shut the plant all down to retool it for war materials, and they offered me a job as just to be there when they got started back in, because they just ceased everything. One day we were working on automobile, and the next day they just said stop everything, and everything stopped. And so until they got organized, they were trying to hold us, another fellow and I, out of the electrician's crew. They want us to clean offices, but I, in the meantime, had been attending night school at General Motors Tech in Flint, studying time and motion, and I thought I could get a better job, so I went down to the Naval Ordnance Plant, Centerline, and they hired me right away. They weren't quite ready to go, but their building was being built, and I temporarily worked as a guard until the offices were completed, and then I went into the purchasing department.
Better back up and tell us when you got married. How
Yeah.
how that came
Alright.
about.
Okay, during, let's see, in 1938, June 15th, I married Irma, that's with an I, Elizabeth Burgess of Columbiaville. Having met her, she attended County Normal School there in Lapeer, right near the high school. In fact, they were in the building next door. I met her there, and when she graduated, she got a job teaching out north of town in a little country school, and I think that she taught 2 years. And if she would have married before that, they would have fired her, because those were the rules. They had country teachers, they had teachers, but they couldn't be married. There were all kinds of rules, but even if they knew you were thinking about it, they were going to fire you.
She lived in Columbiaville and you lived in Lapeer.
Yeah.
What's the distance?
Oh, it was only about,
12 miles?
yeah, I guess, something like that.
How did you go visit her?
Well, I walked a couple times. Boyfriends had a car. I had a bicycle. That's the way I used to get around, but I never rode a bicycle up there. Had friends that had cars, farmer boys that had to have cars to get to school that I got to know.
How did you walk to Columbiaville?
I walked up the railroad track because it was shorter. It was only about 9 miles that way, I think. Maybe 10. So the war then changed a lot of things. See, we'd just been married a couple of years when the war came along. Our oldest boy, Kent, was born before the war. He was born in January of 40. And
Where were you working then?
I was working at Pontiac Motor. And Kim was born a year after the war was declared. He was born in 1942. In January. Then we moved down from Clemensville. We were living in Clemensville when Kim was born. And I used to drive back and forth to Pontiac. Well, then it was too far to drive to Center Line where the Naval Ordnance Plant was. So we bought a house down in Mount Clemens, which was not too far from work. We were fortunate to get a new home. It was small. I think it cost us $3,500 for a 2-bedroom bath. We had oil heat, I know, and 5 acres of land. No, 5 lots. 5 lots, not 5 acres. After the war had gotten a good start, I got real patriotic and enlisted in the Air Force for pilot training, which I did start and went through about a year and a half, and then they shut the programs down, started canceling them, and offered those classes that were closed other positions in the Air Force, and I was assigned to become an instructor in radio directional equipment. We went through school. I went through a school in Madison, Wisconsin, and in Belleville, Illinois, where I taught electronics for almost till the war ended.
When did your family join?
Oh, they were with me. Let's see, the year. I would say, 44. Well, I don't know the exact year.
We took a train to
Yeah,
out west to join you. Was it Oklahoma? Was it
California.
San Antonio? Was it in California?
California. Well, that's what I was going to say. When the war ended, they didn't need trainers anymore. I was assigned to California in a discharge center as an interviewer, a counselor like. So the Army flew, I think 12 of us out there to set up this discharge center, and as soon as I got out there, then I made arrangements for the family to come with me, but that was in 1944. They had been living with me while I was an instructor for a year before that, so.
Where was that?
That was in Belleville, Illinois. Well, it wasn't East St. Louis, it was Belleville.
Well, how did we get to Oklahoma? We lived in
I
Oklahoma.
think you must have taken, you came to, when I was in training in the Air Force there before they cut the program, family came out to, what's that town in Oklahoma? I don't remember.
But you were
I
still in,
rented a house for him, and I could only come in like on the weekends, one day at a time or something, but that didn't last long.
so went from Oklahoma to where? California?
No, well, yeah, in a sense. All you did was come home and get repacked and then move out to California where I was assigned.
Okay. So you went from Oklahoma to California, we went back to Michigan,
Yeah.
then took the train up to California.
Right. So that was a nice long trip.
Then from California you went to,
We stayed out there until I was
Wisconsin?
discharged,
oops,
and then we, which was only until January, let's see, I stayed there until March, I think, of 45.
okay, but where is Madison, Wisconsin, and where
That's
is
where I was in training for
Bellevue
that.
fit into this period of time?
Oh, that was the radio training. That's where they were training me to be an instructor.
So after Oklahoma, you didn't go to California, you went to Wisconsin?
This was between Oklahoma. No, this was between, yeah, would be between Oklahoma. So you see, you were with me then too. That was between the move from Oklahoma to radio school, which was Madison, Wisconsin.
Okay, you bought a trailer
Then
there.
Illinois.
Did you buy a trailer there?
Yep.
Or just rent one?
No, we bought it.
Okay, then you went from
Because
Madison.
we couldn't find an apartment that would take 2 kids.
Okay, then you went from Madison to Belleville.
And I went to Belleville, where I finished up advanced training and as an instructor, and then I made instructor.
Then you went to California.
And then after the war ended, they needed this discharge center, and then they shipped us out there quick.
So then you got, after the war, you came back to, what?
After the war, well, at the time, you know, when you left to go into service during the war, your job was held for you. So my last job in industry was in the purchasing department of the Naval Ordnance Plant, but it was being run by Hudson Motor Car Company. Hudson Motor Car Company was holding a job for me. So after the war ended, and I wanted to get back in civilian work. I came back, but they were slow about tooling up, and it took about, I don't know how long before they were able to call everyone back that had been in service. I finally was called back, and in the meantime, of course, we were trying to find an apartment or a house in the area of Detroit, and we couldn't. There was just nothing available. All these servicemen coming home. No homes were built during the war, and so there was a shortage. And they converted some workers' apartments in Willow Run, Michigan, for veterans. And the veterans had a choice, first choice of living there. And they provided bus service, real reasonable. We could ride a bus from Ypsilanti. I'd say it was 20, must have been 20 some miles. They'd provide that for 35 cents, bus trip, right downtown. So we stayed there until they had some homes built over in Roseville, which was a suburb of Detroit, and I wasn't too that far from the Hudson Motor Car Company main offices on Jefferson. And I bought a car where I could get over there.
You were still working at Hudson Motors when we moved to Roseville?
Yeah, that's why we went there. We moved to Roseville because I was working there on Jefferson, which is on that side of town. Yeah, I moved into a home there. And we stayed there until the Hudson Motor Car Company closed. And they merged, actually, with Nash. My job was eliminated. I was too young on the totem pole. But my boss got me a job with a steel company, selling steel, and I was a steel salesman then. I had territories around Detroit, so everything worked out fine. The pay was very good because I was working on a
1950?
commission.
This 1950?
I don't give me the dates. I don't have any idea.
1950
I don't know the dates.
to 1952.
Oh, I'm sleepy. Talking too much.
1952 to 1957.
We got a big gap in the film. I don't think they could hear that.
When was Kay
Well-
born? Where was Kay born and when?
Oh, Kay, that's right. Kay was born in Willow Run in 1945, 46, 1946. Yeah.
In
Shortly
Ypsilanti.
after we moved to
Hospital in
Ypsilanti, in
Ypsilanti.
the hospital there in
Ypsilanti.
Ypsilanti, Byers.
Was she
By
your
our
only
house.
child to be born in a hospital?
Yeah. She was the only one. By that time, the world had modernized and they had hospitals. Kent and Kim were both born in a house. One in Lapeer and one in Louisville. By the same doctor, though.
When you lived in Roseville, you ran for the school board.
Yes.
You're still a salesman with the steel company.
Right. I ran for the school board and with no outside help, just on our own, Mothers and I went out and talked it up. And we did so well that a group of citizens came to us and asked us if I would run for the city commission.
You lost the school board race.
Yeah.
So then they wanted you to run for city.
They wanted me to run for the city commission because they'd had a bunch of old fellows that had been on forever and ever, and they couldn't see the changes that were coming in our town. And Roseville grew from, what was it? Oh, golly, it was fantastic. It went from about 15,000 to 35,000 in about 3 years. And there was all kinds of problems. Water, not enough water, no storage, no street cleaning, no garbage collection service. Everything was in a mess. So the old boys been on there and just never spent any money and kept the taxes down. Well, as these people moved in, they were willing to pay the taxes, and this is what needed to be done. Anyway, I was elected. No, I was elected and served 2 terms on the city commission. And then I got a job as a northern Michigan representative for this heavy machinery company. Out of Detroit, and it necessitated us moving to somewhere in the center of our territory. We always liked Pinconning, so we chose to move to Pinconning. We bought a new home up there as soon as it was completed, and I started covering my territory from Pinconning, which was all the way to the Straits, all the way down to, let's see, how far south did I go? Really, I think I went way down to Bay City, or further than that maybe. Covered all of the northern half of the eastern side of Michigan. While we were living there, my brother John and his wife were killed in an automobile accident in California, leaving 3 boys, ages, let's see, 6, 4, and 2. So,
What are their names?
John, James, and Jackie. So I got out to California though just before my brother died from complications, and he asked who was going to take care of the boys. I told him I would. Shut it off now. Here's Mother. She'll be talking. So after I made arrangements to ship Janine, that's John's wife, and John's body back, we buried him in Lapeer next to my mother in the Catholic cemetery there. I took the 3 boys back on the plane from San Diego where John was living, and took them back to Michigan. We were in a small home at the time, and so my sister Marie took John, I took James, and Kenny took Jackie until we could get in a bigger home. I immediately started building a home in Marysville, Michigan. Having secured a steel sales job with a company in St. Clair, Michigan. So we started to build a nice home right there in Marysville, and this is where I meant to tell you too, back when remember I told you about fella delivering the lumber to my folks when their house burnt down. Well, that same driver, I told you, became my brother-in-law when I married the wife Irma. Well, he is a carpenter, and he and I built that home in Marysville. He oversaw all of the work, and he did a lot of the work. But we didn't use any contractor. He was our contractor. So he built that home. We had plenty of room for the kids, so we got John back from my sister, and we told Kenny that we had room now for Jackie. Well, they had become so enamored with him that they wouldn't give him up. Well, I didn't push the idea. I didn't insist. They had a child that was about the same age, and they argued that Jackie would fit in so well with them. And he'd been with them a few months while we were building the home, and so we consented to leave him there. But we took John and Jackie then into our family. John and James, I mean. So we moved into Marysville, and I saw the business that what I was in was expanding and needed to be expanded into the south, because a lot of our customers were moving south. So I talked to the owner, and he agreed, and I went down and located a plant and had it built in Fitzgerald, Georgia. We started out with a bare field. I laid out the building, told the contractor what size we wanted, and then I moved on down here myself ahead of time and saw proper installation of the cranes, equipment. And while I was here also, then of course made contacts on where I'd get the raw material. And I went out and solicited business. So when the plant was ready to go, we were all set. So we thought. Then a steel strike happened. Well, luckily, I had friends in Detroit from when I was selling steel there. After I had left Hudson Motor Car Company, and they shipped me carloads of near prime steel. They used to, warehouses always buy rejects or overruns. So I got carloads of steel that way, and I was able to start up and provide the necessary parts for these customers down here.
What's the name of your company?
We called the company G&L Steel. G after me and L after Mr. Lodnick, who was my former boss in Michigan. Well, the plant was successful, and after 9 years, an offer was made that we couldn't refuse, and we sold out, and I retired. That was in 1968. We had a nice home in Fitzgerald, of course, and lots of lawn, and as I got older, we got more medical problems, and we found all the good doctors to be over in Tipton, so we moved to Tipton.
What year?
And
86?
yeah, I think it was, no, 86, moved here in 86, and built a home on the water where our mother could go fishing. Of course, I enjoyed it too. And it was close, like I say, to the hospitals that we liked and the doctors that we liked.
After you sold the company, you bought an Airstream, and what'd you do? Go touring?
Oh, well, we traveled, even before we had sold the company, we had bought an Airstream, and summers, vacation time, we traveled all over the country. We wound up visiting every state except one. That was even including Hawaii and Alaska and the outlying islands. We have been to every state except Idaho. And strangely enough, we spent a month fishing in Montana and never did go. If we had gone 20 more miles, we'd have been in Idaho, but it just never happened. That's the big distinction I have of traveling all over the country. We made a nice trip to Europe, and we rode the trains of Germany and Austria and let's see, what's it, Copenhagen, Denmark's train, all through the Rhine Valley, and that was beautiful. That was really an enjoyable trip.
What do you think has been your happiest time? The happiest moment, or both?
Happiest moments? Oh, let's see.
Working on your
Ken
model
says,
train?
what's the happiest moments?
Working on your model train?
I think the happiest moments was when we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. We celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary in 1988, June 15th, and all the relatives I hadn't seen for years came from California. All my children were here except one that was unfortunate. Could not be here on account of death in the family. But all the friends, relatives, could come and celebrate with us. That was a big surprise and a happy time for Mother and I.
Now you have two step siblings.
What?
You have two step siblings. You have two children born to your father in the second marriage.
Oh, you mean I have a half brother and sister?
Yeah, when I say step, I
Yeah,
mean
my
half.
dad, after my mother died, secured a job as a machinist, which he had done, I guess, evidently years ago in the Grand Trunk. And he was a good machinist, experimental tooling. He was very good at it, and they put him in the aircraft industry out in California. And he married a Port Huron girl and took, well, she was a woman. 4 years, I think it was, after my mother died, and he moved to California and had a boy and a girl out there. So I have a half brother and half sister living out in San Diego. And they even came
What's her
to
name?
our anniversary, which was a big surprise to me. That's Larry and Susan. Larry has his own company. He buys used airplanes, aircrafts, passenger jets, Boeing 747s and things like that, and leases them to other airlines, which is a very profitable business. He was comptroller for one of the airlines out in California for a while, till they were merged with some other company, and now he has this little job. Susan's married to a businessman out there. They're both doing real well.
What do you think was the proudest
What?
event? What was your proudest event or a moment or proudest moment? Happy, different than happiest. When do you think you're the proudest? When you won the election in Roseville?
No. Proudest moment? I've had a lot of proud moments. I was proud when the kids graduated from college. I was proud to see them do so well. I was proud and happy to see the grandchildren that were born. So, see, I have, counting John and John's second family, I have 17 grandchildren. And to date, one great-grandchild. But I don't think there's any one real proud moment that seems to be outstanding. I just had a lot of them. I lived 70 years and going on 71. I think I've had many. I enjoyed the 40th anniversary we had when the whole family got together. That was a real happy, proud time.
Is there any wisdom that you could pass on to your great-grandchildren?
Wisdom.
Any thoughts on what to be happy? Or?
Just like I've always said, like I told the oldest, Kent. I said, whatever you do in life, do the best you can. If it's digging a ditch, dig it as straight and as clean as you can. That philosophy, I think, will hold to anything you do. Just do the best to your ability.
Do you think your saddest moment was when your brother died?
When my mother died, I think.
Your mother?
I think when my mother died was the saddest. Because I was just beginning to realize at that age I was just about ready to graduate from high school. And looking forward to going on, continuing education and try to better ourselves, better myself from being a farm boy. And I was wanting her to be there, to be proud of me. And when she died, it was a big disappointment. I think slowed down my ambitions. Very tough time. She never got to see me in the senior play. I had a lead in the senior play. She never saw me do that. She never saw our grandchildren. She never saw me get married. There was a lot that she missed, but I missed her not being there too. Turned off.
Over there.
Need to make a couple corrections on the dates. Number one, we actually moved to Roseville in 1950 and left there in 1956, in the fall of 1956.
I just happened to think about a humorous incident that happened when I was a youth, still young. In 1932, my dad had a 28 Chevrolet that he wrecked by running off the end of the road and running into an embankment. Well, the force of the crash broke the frame on one side, broke it right in two. So the car was unsafe to run on the highway. It was in good shape otherwise, but had that broken frame, so he had it jacked up pretty much in line and a plate welded across the broken frame. And he hooked it up to this drag, similar to a spring tooth drag that you have nowadays, and put me in it, put it in gear, and showed me how to stop it if I had to, but just to keep it going. And that was my driving lesson. That's how I learned to drive, by pulling that spring tooth drag around and around and around a plowed field until it was all leveled off and all the weeds were distributed so they would dry out and die. But I drove that old Chevrolet around that field. I was 12 years old, and that's how I learned to drive. And from then on, I just drove all over and everywhere. I can't ever remember getting a license. I don't think I got a driver's license until I got married. I don't remember having it, or maybe before then, but not much. But it's a lot different nowadays. You go to all these instruction schools and driver's training to learn how to drive. In those days, when we were young, you just drove a farm tractor or got off in a field somewhere until you learned to shift and back up and turn. That was something I never forgot.
Tell me about your first airplane ride.
Oh yeah, Kent just reminded me. Probably where I got my love for airplanes and wanting to get in the Air Force was one time I was about 9 years old. I told you we had our place, our farm was right on the edge of town, and there was a big field next to us. And one day while I was out messing around the yard doing whatever we do when we're that age, an old Army airplane came flying over and landed in that field. Well, we thought he'd had trouble. My boyfriend and I from the neighbor came. We both ran over there, and it was a two-wing old Waco. Gosh, I don't know what year. Two big open cockpits, you know. And he said, "You boys want to go for a ride?" And we said, "Sure." Not even asking our folks when we didn't get busted, but anyway, we said, "Sure." He said, "Well, if you'll take these flyers," and he had a handful of flyers, announcing that he was going to be giving rides for the weekend. He says, "Take these to town and distribute them around, and come back and I'll give you a ride." So we had bicycles. We jumped on the bicycles, and boy, and I pedaled them too. I didn't throw them in a garbage bucket or hide them or stuff 100 of them in a car or anything, or in a buggy in those days. We actually did him a good job and distributed them one at a time, like he said. We went back and said we had distributed them, and he said, okay, get in. We got in. He'd been working on it, tinkering around, I don't know, changing oil or whatever he was doing while we were gone. Anyway, he said, all right, come on. So we got in. This is the first airplane ride I'd ever been, about the first airplane I'd ever seen. We got in and went off across this whole field, rocking and rolling, and there were trees all down one end of it, big tall trees. And boy, we cleared them, but I could just about touch the tops of them when we went over. He took us down to Lapeer and circled all around so we could see the town from the air, and it was a nice little ride. Probably 15 minutes. That's quite a ride in an airplane. He came back and he started to land, and boy, I'm all eager. I'm looking over the side, watching, and I heard the motor go coughing and spitting, and I thought, well, he's just cutting back. Well, he did cut back, but he couldn't push the throttle back on because I was leaning over the side and leaning right on the throttle. He reached over and whacked me on the shoulder and said, get off the throttle. I never forgot that. And here I was keeping it from revving up the engine so we wouldn't crash into trees. So I jumped back away and made a bumpy landing, but it was okay. But that was sure another good old memory. Another memory I had, this involved my mother. I don't know, I was in high school, junior high school, in the science class one day, and all at once the teacher stopped teaching and went to the door of the room. There was my mother. She had this cake in her hand, birthday cake. I said, what in the world? Instantaneously, I wondered, but I knew what it was. It was my birthday. And would you know, that hour's class, that science class, we had cake and ice cream instead of having a session. Now that took some planning, not only on my mother's part, but also to work with the teacher to do that. In those days, you could do that. I don't suppose principals would allow that nowadays. You'd have to account for all your moments and minutes. But we actually had a birthday party, a surprise party for me right there in the science class. I thought that was something. Oh, I have many memories. You probably get bored of listening to so many, but we used to pick up all those apples, wormy ones, brown ones, ripe ones, green ones, take them to the cider mill and make pure, good old cider. That's something you don't get today. You probably will never see again. Memories of making our own ice cream. We had our cream. Dad hooked up the churn to the motor off of the washing machine. We used to carry our water and heat it in the boiler so Mother could wash clothes. There's just things you can't imagine. When we first got married, we could buy 3 pork chops for $1. Nice big cuts, center cuts. Of course, I know we didn't make much money in those days either. But that prices in comparison. Now you couldn't even get 1 pork chop, an old skinny ratty thing for $1. But those days are gone. Ice cream cones, they used to pile 5, 6 scoops, 10 cents. All you could get on a cone. Then they'd give you a napkin to hold it on the side so you wouldn't lose them. Well, we've seen many a good thing, Mother and I, and the children, and the kids. We've gone a lot of places. Hope we've taught them how to live, how to enjoy life, how to respect other people for their beliefs and the way they want to live. And I'm pretty happy the way all the kids turned out. I would have been happier if they'd all been millionaires, but money isn't everything. I'm only joking there, because you don't need money. I said that at our 50th anniversary party. Money doesn't mean all. It helps, but you can get along without it. You can make do. You can set your goals and still achieve them. Hope I've given you a little insight into what it was like years ago. You'll never, ever probably have to experience a depression such as we've gone through, and I hope never again wars. That's every parent's, every grandparent's, should be every person's wish and prayer, that we never ever go through such turmoil again. That's about all I think of now. There's many memories I have, but if someone, I just can't say, I couldn't say enough, but I better not say any more. Goodbye.